This is round 2 of Amsterdam Chess Open. In round 2, I faced Jacob Brienen from the Netherlands as well as me, and he is rated 1966 FIDE. So this category that I'm playing in, which is category A in the tournament, is rated for 2000 and above, but my opponent is less than 2000 rated FIDE, but he does have a national rating of higher than 2000, which is why he is able to play in this category. So I was excited for this game. However, I was really stressed out before this game, right before this game, because I had to set up the stream, and also since we have double rounds, we don't have so much time between the two rounds. So the pairings were out right at the time that our game is supposed to start. So obviously we had a little bit of a delay, but this meant that I could not prepare. And I saw some games of my opponent. Well, I saw like one game where he was playing with black pieces, and I saw that he would play after e4, e5, knight c6, bishop b5. So I knew that he would go for this opening, and I would play the Lopez. That's all I knew. What I didn't know is that after knight of 6d3, he would go for knight e7. Usually this happens in online chess, in blitz games, and this is the first time I'm seeing this over the board. So I was very surprised in a classical game as well. And the idea is simple. My opponent wants to play knight g6 and maneuver that knight towards the king side and focus on putting pressure on the king side. Maybe that knight will head to f4, which is a really important square in this opening. So obviously, you may be wondering, is this not giving a pawn for free away? Well, if you take this pawn, you may run into some issues with c6, and if you move the bishop, let's say to c4, a4, let's say c4, queen a5 check, and you lose the knight on e5. So that is a bit of a problem, and you cannot afford to do that. So that's why that pawn is not free, and I just went for short castles, c6, bishop a4, knight g6. So this position is so strange when you think of the fact that this came from a Lopez, because usually this pawn is not on c6. Like, what is the pawn doing there? Usually there's a knight there, but in this case, since the pawn is on c6, I was thinking, okay, what do I do? Because I'm not familiar with this opening. I mean, I've seen it here and there, but I don't really know 100% what I should do here, what the plans are. So I started thinking, what do I do? My opponent obviously wants to go for d5 at some point. So since my opponent wants to play d5, maybe even b5, I thought, let's stop that altogether. Why not? With c4. And we're going to end up in a very different structure. You would not be able to figure out that this came from a Lopez. Bishop e7, knight c3, short castles, and d4. Completely changing up the structure of this game, which is pretty crazy, but I cannot tell anymore that this came from a Lopez, not at all. My opponent for d6, obviously taking on d4. You don't really want to do that yourself, especially if you can defend the pawn, right? But I'm really happy here. I have so much space, I have control over the center, and my opponent's pieces are quite passive. As long as his knight does not go to f4, I'm very happy. Obviously, if my opponent plays knight f4 now, then bishop takes f4, and also there's a pawning actually. But even then, if bishop takes f4, you need to have a good follow-up with black. Since I have so much control of the center, it's probably not a good idea to play this. But obviously, my opponent wants to play knight h5 to support the knight to go to f4. But if knight h5 now, let's say, the knight takes e5 is always this kind of tactic in a position, right? Opening up the queen towards the knight. So that's why you cannot play knight h5 with black so easily. And that's what I'm trying to prevent, right? I'm trying to prevent that knight from going to f4. I play h3 right now because bishop g4 is quite annoying to deal with, so I'd rather prevent that move altogether. Rook e8, rook e1, and here a6. And here I started thinking, okay, my opponent obviously wants to play b5. How to prevent this? Well, like, I can't really prevent this, but I thought, okay, it's probably going to be played, and I would like to put my bishop into safety, so I played bishop b3, h6, and now I went for a4. There are some ideas of sacrificing that bishop on f7, if I end up playing c5, let's say, but it's all sophisticated, and I think it's just giving up a free piece, and it's not really worth it. My opponent, I think, was maybe afraid of some sort of knight g5 or maybe bishop going to g5 at some point, which is why h6 was played by my opponent. But I don't think it's anything to be afraid of, really. But okay, I play a4, my opponent plays a5. Obviously, I wanted to play the move a5 myself because I wanted to fix that pawn structure on the queen side, but that is not happening since my opponent played a5. But then I started thinking, okay, bishop e3, bishop d7, and here I thought, what do I do? I took my sweet time here to figure out what is the position asking from me here, because I have everything I want. Okay, almost everything. I have so much space, I have control of the center, my pieces are developed, not all of them, but all the minor pieces are out, and I'm asking myself, how can I improve my position? Where is my play actually? Not easy to figure out, honestly. Apparently, one of the moves I'm supposed to consider here is d5, which is pretty crazy to me because I don't really want to shut down the center deliberately. So this is something that I would need to look into to understand why I would be playing d5 here, because frankly, I don't really understand what the point is of d5. Because in the game, I played d takes e5. With the idea that after d takes e5, I'm playing c5. I'm fixing the pawn structure on the queen side, and b7 is suddenly a major weakness over here. And the downside is that this pawn is becoming a weakness too, because it's not that easy to defend that pawn, and also I'm opening up the bishop, so that can also be helpful. But if my opponent plays the right moves, then my pawn on c5 may fall, and I have to either defend it or sacrifice it for compensation. I definitely have compensation in these positions if I lose that pawn on c5, but obviously I don't want to lose that pawn, right? So queen c8, I was expecting, what was I expecting here again? I think I was expecting bishop f8 and then bishop e6. But queen c8 is also very much possible to prepare to move bishop e6, because after that knight d7, and then we have to start asking questions to ourselves, how do we defend that pawn, right? Knight d2. I'm heading for those weak squares. b6, d6, they seem very appealing to me, so I would love to put my knight on one of these squares. But obviously, my opponent is making it very difficult for me because rook d8, and if I move my knight now, then all of a sudden bishop takes h3, the queen is hanging, so yeah, he's setting up a discovery attack, so obviously I have to move my queen. Bishop e6, bishop takes, queen takes. I didn't really know what I was supposed to do here. I hated the thought of playing knight c4 because that knight would be pinned, because the bishop is now not defended anymore. And then I thought, okay, you know what? Let's head into an endgame. I'm feeling good about the endgame. I'm feeling confident. And turns out this is not good at all. I'm slightly worse here. Apparently knight f4 is a really strong move to play here, but difficult to consider, because if knight f4, then I would love to take that, and it looks quite pleasant with the white pieces. But I guess this pawn on c5 is a bit loose, so that's why it's hard to lose that bishop on e3, right, for the knight. So anyway, my opponent went for queen takes c4, knight takes c4, knight d7. I saw all of this. I played rook ad1, knight takes c5. I'm giving the pawn away because I know that I can recapture it with knight takes a5 here. So rook e8. Here I took with bishop takes c5. I initially thought that rook d7 was maybe better, but I guess it's too passive, and rook a8 is quite active. I thought I was just winning a pawn here until I realized that after bishop takes c5, rook takes a5, this bishop is protected. So then I had to think, okay, what is the best move here? And I found out that regardless of missing that bishop on a7 is still protected, it's still the best move to take on c5. I guess if bishop takes c5, I thought I was just winning a pawn here, but apparently the computer is very confident about white's chances here. I thought I could just play a5, and if rook a7, what was I planning to do here? I think knight d8 and the pawn on c6 is hanging, but I did sense that maybe this is a little bit drawish because it's not so easy to convert this. I mean, with good play, black should be able to hold this pretty easily. I mean, it's really difficult to make progress here with white. We're not that active. This knight is a little bit loose. Also, actually, there's rook c5. There's rook c5 and the pawn is dropping. So I was sensing some, not per se craziness, but more like it's not so clear if I'm actually going to win this game. But now that my opponent played the move bishop takes, not bishop takes, but rook takes a5 instead, now I take on e7 with the bishop, knight takes e7, and I play rook d1. And suddenly, my opponent's pieces are looking very silly here because I play rook d7. Well, I can give a check first and then retreat to d7, and all these pawns on the 7th rank are just really bad. So b5 is what my opponent played. I give a check, king h7, and the king is away from the action, even further away. A takes b5, c takes b5, and I just play rook b8. And now I'm just winning the pawn, and the computer is still skeptical about my winning chances here, it looks like, but I was feeling very confident because rook a1 check, king h2, king g6, rook takes b5. I'm just taking the pawn, and any trade, well, maybe I don't really want to end up in a rook endgame, but let's say if a rook trade happens, then I'm really happy. And since I still have the knight on the board, I can create some threats with the knight, and I was feeling really confident here because of that. So f6, rook b7, knight c6, knight d5. It's really funny that the computer is so harsh about these moves, but yeah, I really like knight d5, but I guess I need to look back into Dvořáčky's endgame manual, how to win these kind of games, because apparently I'm either supposed to push this pawn or this pawn. I guess it makes sense to gain some space, but I thought that my knight had to be centered on d5, and I was eyeing for some ideas here. Rook b1, and here I'm either trying to play rook c7 to play knight e7 and then knight f5, and then, you know, create some threats here on that pawn on g7, or the move that I actually played, f4. So it was very tempting here to play the move b4, to just push the pawn, but if I push the pawn, maybe I get stuck. I have to keep defending that pawn, and if I have to keep defending that pawn, maybe my opponent can get into some position that's very drawish, so I didn't really want to allow counterplay for my opponent. So I thought, let's go for it right away with f4, because this king is actually in danger. E takes f4, knight takes f4, king h7, knight h5, king h8, rook takes g7, and I was not sure about playing f4 because of king h8, because if that king is safe there, and I play rook takes g7, and somehow this knight can be attacked, then maybe my pieces get a little bit stuck, and my opponent will be able to take enough pawns to create a drawing position. But I calculated all of this, and after rook takes b2, I play rook c7, I'm attacking the knight, knight e5, I take the pawn, knight f3 check, king g3, knight g5, and now simply h4, and the knight is hanging. It's the only piece that's defending against this checkmate on h7, so my opponent doesn't really have moves anymore. I did think around this time that, imagine if my opponent didn't have the pawn on h6, there are some stalemate tricks that could have been tried here. But because of that h-pawn, no stalemate tricks in sight, and after rook b3 check, king h2, my opponent resigned and I won the game. So yeah, it was super nice to win this game in this fashion. It was a little, slightly shaky in the middle game. Definitely some improvements needed there, but the end game felt really clean and smooth, and it was really satisfying to play this end game up a pawn and slowly converting it to a full point. So now I'm on 2 out of 2. So I won the first 2 games, and tomorrow I'll be facing a strong opponent. So yeah, wish me luck for that one. I'm super excited to play in this tournament, and it's quite a crazy tournament with double rounds, and there's only 6 rounds, by the way. So now there's only 4 rounds left, which is crazy. It feels like the tournament just started, but it's like almost ending too. So anyway, I'm gonna get some rest now, and hopefully the pairings will be up soon so I can prepare. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thanks to the support. Make sure to tune in to my live streams. Actually, I'm not sure if this recap will go up before any of the live streams because the games are happening so quickly. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!